Hello and welcome to the Core Advantage podcast. My name's Darren McInnes.
And I'm Jacob Tober.
On the podcast, we talk about all things sports science, strength and conditioning, and athletic development.
You'll find links, show notes, and references in the podcast details and also on our website.
Red lights everywhere, and we are good to go.
Let's do it. Episode 153.
Yeah. So the thing that is burning a hole in my brain at the moment is the challenge of the return to play. I think it's coming around. We've been talking about it each week. It's coming soon, but it's upon us before we even know what's going on. So I thought maybe we could dive into that a little bit and kick around some ideas, because there's not necessarily a perfect right answer with this stuff, but I think there's some interesting stuff to pick apart for coaches and athletes to get
for sure. Yeah, I think that point about there's no perfect answer is really important here too. It's like it's not like, oh, well, you guys said that, but then later you said that. It's like, well, there's plenty of ways to skin the return to play cat. Like you can do it, particularly if you're not coming off an injury, you're just coming off a forced holiday from sport for potentially a couple of months, 2-3 months for some people. Yeah. You're coming off a baseline of zero. There's a few different ways you can do it that all will kind of work and reduce your risk of injury, mitigate that risk, but also increase your performance as quickly as possible. So it's a thing that you can do in a few different ways. So let's dive into it. Yeah.
So I suppose the first thing to think about is, and we're also, I'm putting on a presentation on Monday night, a full Zoom going into this as well. But this is going to be more the underpinning behind it. I reckon the first thing to think about is that adaptations, our body de-adapts really quick. So it's this marvelous thing that we can apply stress. The body adapts by building itself stronger. Like if you had a car that did that, if you had a motorbike that every time you went and rode it hard, it got stronger. That's an amazing thing.
Yeah, just give it 72 hours in the shed and it just gets the paint's redone and it's got a bigger engine. Yeah, that'd be the best.
Yeah, amazing. So it is an incredible machine that we live in and that we operate. But the flip side is that if you go back to the shed to get that motorbike 6 months later, it's probably going to be okay. Whereas if you've left your body not doing much, it gets very weak very quick. What is it, within 72 hours, some ridiculous percentage of your VO2 max falls off the wagon?
Yeah, particularly your anaerobic capacity, like your high-end anaerobic enzymes, they start deserting you at around the 72-hour mark. They really start to atrophy and waste away and die on you.
It's just
and then
crazy.
Within 10 days, you've already lost a significant percentage of your strength. If you don't do any strength type training, and speed and power is very similar. So
it's and it's really specific. That speed and strength is really specific to what your sport requires of you. So I reckon the first point is to have a realistic assessment of where that body, if it's your team, if it's yourself, where the bodies are at on day one. And I think you've just got to assume that they have done no work. I think if you assume a basis of work... This is for
coaches?
This is for coaches, yeah. I think you've just got to work... And you've got to have the assumption that either you didn't do work, or if you're an athlete, you've got to have the assumption as good as you tried to put all that work in, it's wonderful an effort you made, it's still going to be a better bet to kind of act like you didn't do work and just start easy. Because you'll end up overreaching anyway, because your competitive juices will get going. And you'll want to put the foot to the floor anyway. So if you kind of step onto the return to play field with the mentality of, I've done nothing, I reckon that's a much better base to work off. Because the ultimate way to make this worse and slower is to overcook yourself in that first week, to rush back too much and actually set yourself up for a much slower return to play because of that. I think that's teams and individuals undercook that first week and it'll pay off hugely. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, for individuals, it's a really tricky spot to be truly objective, to really be honest with yourself and go, but I worked so hard. Every session I was sweating and you could feel the lactic acid. It's like, yeah, but was it as hard as the last grand final you played in?
Yeah, was it full game intensity?
Was it as hard as a finals level game that you've played? Think back to that, how hard you're working and the adrenaline and your body was shaking and all that level of work. Have you been training that hard? And
no.
To say for a few individuals, I can't think of many who actually are training that hard.
Yeah, like you and I both train reasonably hard, But if we went on a run together, it would definitely get harder straight
Right,
away.
go up by 20. It'd go up 25% in the first 100 metres. No, it'd take a couple hundred metres. So, has this pace for you? Has this pace for you? Oh, I normally run like this. And then you'd get 500 metres, you get a K, and go, okay. All right, you ready to go? Yeah, I'm ready. And off we go. And then it's like it'd be silent. Just like when you're doing a yo-yo or a beat test with your brother or your sister, and it's just like, you are not beating me. You are 2 years younger than me. There is no way I'm losing this. And so that's going to be exacerbated. That's going to be enhanced by the fact that you haven't seen your teammates in so long. So even training is going to feel like and have that kind of, we're back, we can go again. And everyone's going to be training and playing a little bit harder than
exuberance.
even before.
A lot of exuberance.
Exactly.
And so I think the assumption is you assume no work, and therefore you assume that you have de-adapted. You're walking into your return to play with no adaptations up your sleeve. The normal adaptations of strong bones, tendons, muscles, ligaments, metabolic adaptations, heart, lung, or nervous system control. Assume that they've all been wiped off the table, and in fact...
Reset the scores.
And in fact... some of you, and not just reset in a way that's never happened before, probably for most of you, unless you've done an ACL or something really significant. You, I think, also remember some of your cells, some of the athletes' cells have never played sport before. You got 6 weeks worth of new cells. They're like, what the hell is this?
That have never seen a sprint or a box out or a tackle or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a whole new thing. So I think if you start from that assumption, from that principle,
nice.
I think every other decision you make, that's the decision that helps you make every other decision better, both for yourself and if you're a coach or a parent for your team or for your athletes that you're helping with. So I reckon that's the starting point. So we've got that out of the way. Go.
But before we go on, before we continue from that point, people are going to be like, oh, but it's going to take months to get back. The good news is it doesn't take long to get that handful of cells up to speed and to get your nervous system back to where it was. So if you've played sport in the past, months ago before the lockdown, and you've come out of this and you're assuming a base of 0, it's not like you're going to take an ACL length of time to get back to scratch. This isn't a 12-month re-ramp thing. It's it's going to take a little bit of time, but not like, don't feel like we're about to go. And 8 weeks later, you're ready for training. No, much quicker than that.
I think like 4 weeks later, you're good enough to play, and then 6 weeks later, you're close enough to your best that it's okay. Like you're not amazing, but you're going to be feeling pretty normal. Yeah, 90% of the way there. Yeah, exactly. But the big thing is that you don't have time to stumble. If you run out of the gates too fast and you stumble and fall over, you don't have time for that because that will drag everything out. So you want to do it right the first time.
Yeah, because if you try and go too hard from week 1, that 4 weeks to being pretty decent could end up being 12 because you have some niggles in those first couple of weeks that slow everything else down, or they lead to a catastrophic injury that could create real problems that could cause you 6 months of grief.
Like we have exactly. We've got a young athlete that I've been doing some work with, and he had a knee injury. I won't go into details. Had a knee injury, nailed the rehab. Everything was going brilliantly, and I said, okay, you can start running now. And I was really prescriptive, not too much, this amount. And I get a call from him, and he's having some shin splint problems, so unrelated to the knee, but really
was the original injury,
really sore shins. And he said, "Well, yeah, I think it was because I was running funny when I had that stitch." I'm like, if in your first week of returning back to running, you're running so hard that you have a stitch, then we've stuffed that up really.
And then limping because of it.
We've stuffed that up really badly, and it's that urgency of getting the fitness back. It's like getting the engine back. It's like, you know what? Step 1, get the chassis back. And as the chassis is getting better, the engine can come along for the ride a little bit. You can do other stuff with it. But yeah, it was hilarious.
Doesn't matter how fit you are if you're injured.
Yeah, heart and lungs, like a beast. But if your leg can't run, it doesn't matter. So with that in mind, I reckon that the best thing to do is talk about. So the end point is we want within 4 weeks. The goal is let's get you back to real good match fitness where you can go, your body feels great, you can enjoy sport all over again. That's a clear goal. the start point for that, then, I think in that first week, the inclination for a lot of people will be to do lots of fitness work. And I think actually it's just get your body moving into the positions, angles that you do in your sport, but at a lower intensity for a lower duration. So it's literally just, it sounds so lame, but it's going through the motions. Like you just put your body, this is how you change direction, this is what you do. So you play, but you have drills and so forth, but you do it in such a way that it's pretty underwhelming. You don't want to be chasing someone. We were chatting to the team about it today, and Hayley said, she was talking to one of our athletes, and she said, look, just don't be chasing soreness. You don't need to chase soreness. The soreness will be there anyway. You'll get sore.
Don't worry about that.
It's not a badge of honour to have trained so hard you got really sore, but you'll get that anyway. But I think, phase one is you assume someone has been either on the couch or in the backyard kicking a footy, soccer ball, or dribbling the basketball or whatever it may be. But they haven't actually opened the hips up for any real running speed. They've not really done anything that replicates the shapes of the sport. So week one, I reckon, is just re-expose your body to the shapes in relatively small amounts.
In particular, I would say lateral, moving sideways.
Yep.
Backpedaling, multi-directional stuff is going to be the thing that's really tricky and awkward to do on your own.
Yeah.
So therefore, we tend not to go at it with much intensity because we don't have anyone to defend or react against or corral or whatever it might be. So sideways stuff, hips, adductors, getting low into a stance. All sports have some form of defensive or positional stance. So getting comfortable with that against someone and moving from there is going to be really important. And not to go too hard at it, not to try and sprint and tackle and work hard at it.
And decel as well, like your quads, getting some deceleration work in as well. Because often we'll really enjoy practicing a lot of acceleration work. We might still throw some agility in, but a real missing piece is, because decel just looks weird, doesn't feel great, nobody wants to do it. But there's heaps of decel in sport. So being able to slam on those brakes as well. But I think that very first session, if you're a coach and you've got your team and the first session is, all right, we're allowed to go next Tuesday, say, whatever it might be, or you're doing some stuff in the park, whatever it might be, depending on what your sport's governing bodies have said you can and can't do. I think it's really thorough warm-up, light, movement drills, some acceleration work, a little bit of decel work, but the kids should be leaving that first session.
All the adults. It applies to adults as well.
Very much applies. That's a good correction.
Probably more so because the kids will actually bounce back because they got that young, sprightly collagen and all that growth hormone that goes through their body when they're asleep. Us adults take a little longer to recover from things. It's probably more important if you've got an amateur footy team or a big V squad or whatever it might be. Be warned, those people are going to have injury histories as well, so they're going to be more exposed potentially.
Yeah, so I think that first session, everyone should finish that a little bit underwhelmed and kind of like, I feel like we haven't really even started properly yet. If you feel like you haven't quite started, like it wasn't enough, it was probably plenty. Because the likelihood is, if you do it that way, about 40 to 50% of your team that are fudging on what they've said they were doing are actually going to be really sore the next day anyway. Like you've dug a deep of enough of an adaptation hole. I mean, it's coming back to the idea of exercise is a dose of damage, and you want to start with the lowest effective dose you can get that first day back. So not heaps. You don't want to touch maximum speed. You just want to get into the shapes. So if you do some strides at, so that's running at, say, 70% of your maximum pace for a short distance, just getting a feeling of sort of effortless speed, I think that's good.
With easy deceleration too, so not trying to pull up too hard, just coasting out of them.
Just get a little bit of an exposure to that shape of running. I would say on that too, I think what will be a real temptation is that sports that typically run... Sports will do a judo. Have I told you my judo AIS story?
No. Okay. I'm aware of it.
It's not really my story. It's like I shouldn't make it like
a story.
The story. So it's hilarious. Judo holds the record for having the most injuries at the AIS. They're the injury capital of camps at the AIS. Because they used to, go up to the AS for these camps. They had a 3-day intensive camp, and because they wanted to make it impressive and count and do lots of stuff, they would make these judo athletes who never run for more than 3 steps in a competitive sense. In one
3
direction.
steps is generous. Some of them would compete in a way that means they don't run ever.
Yeah.
Like they lunge and that would be about it.
That's about it, yeah. Having them do like all these sprints, and they just kept tearing hamstrings and doing all these injuries and just having this astronomical injury rate because they were running approximately 99 metres further than they were used to running. I reckon we're going to get a bit of that with court sports and even with footy, where we're going to have people doing 400s, 800s, even hundreds. My thing would be if you're in a court sport and you're running for more than, I'd say 40 metres, maybe 50 at the top. What
Even
do you,
that's probably generous. Yeah. Probably like you might do a little bit of conditioning type running in, and we'll talk about conditioning in a little bit. But you might do a little bit of conditioning type running in that in that distance zone. But I think if you're doing hard speed work, you'd keep it under 30.
Yeah, given that 16 metres foul under foul line. In basketball,
exactly.
for
Volleyball
instance.
courts 10. Volleyball's 10 by 10. Netball, you've got 10 metre thirds.
Yeah.
You don't have room. You don't have the luxury of a long acceleration. So giving your athletes a long time. Oh, I've got 40 metres. I'll get to top speed by the 15 metre mark. You're out of room if you're a wing attack. That's it.
And you're just giving them a long rope, and you're begging for quad strains. You're absolutely begging for quad and hammy dramas. So that first week, first session, you have them move. You do a lot less. I always say to people when they're returning from, because we've done so much rehab over the years that we've actually seen what it looks like when athletes return after 3 months, after 6 months, after 12 months. It's something we're pretty familiar with. And what I always say to people is take whatever you think you should do, halve it again, and then halve that bit that you've just halved, and that's how much you should do the first time. I think that's. Yeah. And I think that's definitely the case for that first workout. Then, let's say the next training's Tuesday. Have a little honest conversation about where you're at. It's quite likely that some people will, believe it or not, still be sore from Monday's training. And so Wednesday's training should be pretty easy again. If people aren't recovered from the first one, don't push them anyhow. Just give the body time to adapt. So that whole first week, I think, you put down to just tissue adaptation back into movement, not into speed power, just back into the movements. What you can do though is, because there are competing priorities, like you want to get those metabolic elements up. I think what you can do though in that same week is you can be smashing out, if you're able to, some stuff on stationary bikes, some other, it can be cross trainer if you happen to have the luxury of having that. Some high intensity workouts, as long as it's not burpees, but that kind of thing. What would you, if you're going, Monday, Wednesday, Sunday, let's say, what do you reckon you would chuck in on the other days to try and hit that, to separate out that metabolic fitness from that chassis fitness?
Yeah, like
the
off leg
structural
stuff
fitness.
Off legs is your best bet. But like there's. Well, I think we'll probably round this thing out. We'll probably finish by talking about fitness. I think the way this is sort of panning out here. I think coaches and teams tend to very much panic about the fitness of their players. Fitness. Are we fit enough? Can we run out a game? Can we play out the whole thing? And you'll talk about this on Monday at length. But fitness isn't actually that big of a deal, and it doesn't take that long to build.
Great.
Like you can get that stuff pretty quick. But the thing is, if you chase that aggressively at the expense of, a 10% injury rate in your team, hammies, quads, calves, all that kind of stuff, then it doesn't matter how fit they are, they're all on the bench. So, and then it'll cost them more time and another, because at the moment we're all in a quarantine. And you mentioned before, we've seen a lot of injuries. An injury is like an individual body part quarantine. It's like we've quarantined, if you've done your ACL, your knee and that leg is quarantined from activity, in a gradual unlocking, phase type return to normal society. Yeah. And it's just that type of quarantine just happened to the entire population. So you've just got to take it real easy. And in those first weeks, prioritize skill. Like get a heap of skill and X's and O's and tactics and team chemistry and things like that going. So You know, the Bulls,
Yeah.
we'll keep using this Bulls example, but the documentary is so good that I'm watching at the moment, that everyone's
it's
watching
great.
it, it's not just me. Not like I've found a thing.
What,
Everyone's watching
is
it.
there a Bulls doco? Tell me more.
It's on Netflix. You have to look.
Michael who?
Like they're working on chest passes, and like you look at footage from their training, it's like a whole bunch of shoot around.
Yeah.
Like they're just shooting the ball and they're talking smack and they're running through plays. Like use the early days and use the time while you're getting the tissue adaptation in to work on that stuff. And then as your players are responding well to workouts, they're not pulling up too sore, everyone's feeling good, then you can start challenging them by opening up, you know, a basketball analogy or soccer analogy, small-sided games. Start with 1-on-1, 4-on-4, it depends on your sport. But start with small-sided games and then, you know, increase the distance they get to go. So make the pitch bigger or give them half court, then full court and things like that. So you can really, as a coach, you can really scale things within that to take it away. But in answer to your question from before as to what they should do on those off days, it depends where you're at, depends on the individual, but you should be looking to get your strength training in as well. So, you know, it could just be basic isometric type stuff like, you know, straight leg bridges, planks, dead bug, like basic stuff like that. Or if you're a more advanced athlete, getting in the gym, squatting again, hitting your heavy stuff, getting after the weights properly. Again, though, in that space, remember your tissue and your strength and your nervous system are also detrained. So you don't want to go getting sore on a Monday from your soccer, then getting sore on a Tuesday from your heavy squat day.
Yeah.
Like everything's come right back down. So you
If
just got to
you're
think, all right,
planning on doing single leg RDLs, start them this week. If you've been slack with it, be honest with yourself. Say I've been slack. Start them this week. Anything that's going to create unaccustomed soreness from a strength point of view, get that out of the way now. Because the worst thing you could do is create unaccustomed soreness on Monday from a running
your
around point of
Nordics
view.
or your single leg RDLs. Yeah.
And then back that up with unaccustomed soreness from the weights, from the strength work.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And I think off legs cardio, like 8 and 12s, fartlek, whatever it may be, but just do some stuff that actually gets you gassing at that top level. Like just say hello to those anaerobic enzymes. Say hello to phosphofructokinase. Like those are the bad boys that you want on your side. I think that's really important. Because a lot of people won't do as much of that. My sister's just joined our live here. That's got to be a mistake. There's no way she's watching this.
It's crazy. Mum was in before as well. Hello, Mum.
Your mum watches everything. Come on.
She does. That's true.
Can I just quick story? So Pat and I tried to do a troubleshooting because we had some bad audio on the Monday night coaches catch up. So Pat and I were like, we'll just start a quick little live and no one will join in. And then bang, all of a sudden 10 people were looking at us trying to fix audio, including your mum.
So, that is the nature of the thing called alive. So.
It was pretty funny. But yeah, so week 1, I think that's the trick. Get some movement, off legs work. And for coaches, there's like so much skill stuff people are going to be rusty on. Just fundamentals. Kicking, catching, passing, moving, calling out, those simple drills where you're calling out and calling for the ball, just getting used to all the timing of being amongst other bodies. There's a lot that...
Peripheral vision stuff, big time.
Yeah.
Being in a chaotic environment again, yeah.
And just being used to changing direction and all that kind of stuff, because people's nervous systems will lose that. We lose our way really quickly. We'll
have some dumb players at every sport for quite some time.
Yeah, it just takes a while to sharpen up again. Yeah. So that's week 1. And then I think if we look at week 2, it's obviously all the same things there, except now we do want to add, I think, a bit of an accumulation of some work. We want to get some work capacity into those legs, into that body. What do you think is the best way to do that?
Well, yeah, so it's...
If we're naming the weeks, week 1 is move again. That's the theme for the week. Move again.
It's so tricky to be prescriptive because so many different teams are going to be in so many different places based on their athletes and all that kind of stuff. In broad terms, though, let's speak in generalities. You want to be spending some time, and a small amount of time in that first workout of week 2, a small amount of time pushing towards, not at, but towards the speeds you would run at in your sport. Yeah,
so maybe 80% of
80% of whatever speed it is you play. And you got to look at the movement pattern of your sport. So if you play rugby sevens, Aussie rules, soccer, that means you're going to probably sprint 30 metres, 40 metres at a time. If you're running in a wing, for example, as an example of that. But if you're a basketballer, going out to the football field and doing some flying 30s isn't actually a high priority. You might want that eventually, but that's not a high priority for getting those players back to games, particularly at a grassroots level where you think junior sport, lower level leagues are probably going to return from less of an off-season. They're going to have less warning before they do return.
It'll just go. Yeah, so I'm thinking...
It'll just be like, oh, we're playing in 2 weeks. So you won't have as much time to get ready. So you'd want to prioritise the things that are going to be really important for your sport earlier.
And I'm thinking you're pushing towards 80% of your speed, but you're having much higher rest periods, and you're doing that, but not into a feeling of genuine fatigue. So that first session, it's not into fatiguing levels of running. It's still running pretty tidy, pretty clean. It's just kind of saying hello to those specific joint angles, specific muscle loadings at speed.
And do it in the first half of your workout as well, which will help minimise that fatigue too.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's
either straight after your warm-up or not long into, like, it wouldn't want to be one of your first 2 or 3 drills out of your session. So warm up and then either sprint or do high speed running then, or a couple of drills incorporate some more open running.
And I think really important to structure it in such a way that it's not competitive running.
Yeah, nice one.
If you line them up like it's a race and then say to them, ready, set, go, but this isn't a race, you're an idiot.
No, it's a race.
It's a race. I don't care what you call it, it's a race. And competitive juices just take over. So you really do want to structure it so that they're putting the work in it, and it can be one person's here, one person goes there, but you just stagger it in such a way that there's not a sense of a race, not a sense of competition. What there is a sense of is collectively lifting the level of fitness in the group, but it's through a really collaborative rather than competitive kind of lens, I suppose. And so I think that the same, so that's your movement stuff. So you're now moving into a little bit of speed emphasis, off legs.
Sorry, Darren, same with change of direction in week 2. You'd want to be getting some of the movement patterns you're going to be doing in your sport. Again, look at what sport you play or coach, and start doing some of those agility moves at a little more intensity now. So if week 1 you did, walking scrimmages effectively, just gently slid across the key, for example, as a basketballer. In week 2, you might now be doing some, moderate pace run-throughs of some 5-on-5 offense type stuff. Or some small-sided games, but again, try not to call it a game, try not to have scoring so much, as more like keepings off type stuff. Or things of that nature.
I think there's probably a bit of, I think somewhere in between. I'm just spitballing here, but I think maybe you introduce a little bit of competition, because the kids will be, otherwise they'll just be chafing at the bit and they'll just do it on their own anyway. And senior athletes are going to be just the same, where you might do a little bit of 3/4 court in basketball, for instance, 3/4 court scrimmage, but you don't keep a score. So it's a little competitive, but you tell everyone don't push too hard, but you're just to get a bit of your timing back and that sort of thing, but still keep it pretty restricted.
Yes, sorry, and you can do, like in sports like basketball, you can do things where you do 2-on-2, but you've only got 1 or 2 dribbles, so you can constrain the amount of speed they can get up at a time, and make it more about passing and moving without the ball, things like that, where they're less at that high intensity. So you can get creative with the rules you put into those competitive games to make them competitive, but within themselves. And
I mean, footy is really well set up for that stuff, because footy already does a lot of that, because it's got such a great recovery emphasis. That footy training is much more, you don't have so many practice matches, because a lot of basketball trainings are actually kind of like a practice match sandwiched in between some teaching. Whereas footy has so much more skill-based, soccer as well as a lot of drills there. So you just put a lot of drills in.
Small-sided games. Yeah.
You just pick your drills. Yeah. And continue to work on the skills, and you just dial up the intensity, I think. And then, to me, week 3 is actually where you start. Sorry, go ahead.
Just to wrap up week 2, though, again, less volume than you think.
Yeah.
So for week 1 is get moving, be wary of intensity, and let's just get skills and X's and O's and tactics and stuff like that into our players. And week 2 is, all right, let's start pushing in a little bit of 80 to 90% high intensity stuff. Start with tiny volumes. How many sprints? Oh, should we do 20 sprints? No, do 6 sprints.
Yeah.
6 sprints, 6 agility things, that's it. That's your high speed work.
And that's Monday.
See how they pull up?
Yeah.
See how they pull up. If that's good.
For those of you listening, I'm really sorry. Jacob and I both made the exact same hand gesture and face, which was see how you go.
Would you like some bread?
Which is really not going to translate well to the people driving in their cars. Sorry about that. But it's the idea that you test the water that Monday session or that Tuesday session, whatever that first session of week 2 is. You do that, and then you see how you go. And it might be that everyone says, "I've put up amazing." You go, "Cool. We can push that a little more.
We'll double it."
Yeah.
Or you can go 6 sprints, 12 sprints, 18 sprints, the first 3 workouts.
Yeah.
Or they pull up horribly, you go 6, 7, 8 sprints, those first 3 workouts.
Yeah. And as you're making these decisions, I think you want to reflect on, there was Mick Hughes shared a great post last week about the NFL had a lockout where they weren't able to play. They basically had 3 months. 3 months where they couldn't play. And they had an astronomical Achilles rupture rate in that next season. And it was a great highlight of it. It doesn't take much of a deload to create that reload risk. So week 2, first session is touching on speed a little more, getting a little bit more volume in, and then you can progress as you like through that week. And I think that's a good week. Now at that point, as a coach or an athlete, I reckon you're going to be feeling like, well, we're behind. Look what everyone else is doing.
That's exactly what I was going to say next. Is like,
you're going to be feeling
this
anxious.
is where you'll get itchy and anxious, and like, I haven't done enough. Where are my players at?
Yeah. And the thing is just to trust the process, trust the logic, because week 3 is going to be a week where you start to really get into it. Weeks 1 and 2 are really just reacquainting the body to movement and a bit of fitness, and week 3 we can start to push a little bit more. So my thought would be week 3, you don't want to actually up, if you're running it at 80% max speed week 2, I think probably you still don't want to push that up, maybe 85 to 90. You don't want to push that up much, maybe even just do 80, but start to get just a little more volume in. So you haven't addressed those max qualities, but you're just starting to get more work under the belt. Is that what you think?
Yeah, it's kind of like skills, speed, conditioning. Week 3 is more of a volume type emphasis. And so again, we're not running to puke city, smash them till they can't walk anymore type running, but let's take that 80% of intensity running and let's actually do it for repeat sprints. Let's do it with a shorter recovery, less of a walk back, more density, more volume, more reps. Yeah. And
I've called the theme for the week 3 layering in the volume. So again, the first session, you layer it in a bit less than you think you should. You see how your team is pulled up, and you go from there. And it might be that this is the time too where, because you might have quite disparate levels of fitness across a list of 20, 30 people, that you start to divide them up a little bit and say, all right, you guys are in better condition. I want you to put a bit more work in. You can be in the lead group, and this group can chase you. So a bit of intergroup competition at this point, I think, is actually healthy. So you have a slower group, like in basketball when we did the yo-yo with the BV testing in Bendigo, where we had the bigs having to chase the smaller players the way it was lined up on the court. I think that sort of thing is quite healthy, where you have to work a little harder to try and chase. Not an individual, because the real competitive juice is you versus me, do or die. That's like gold medal competitiveness, but just a little bit of cohort competitiveness where you just want to be chasing another group a little. I think that's quite healthy.
Nice.
And so you're layering in more volume. Session 1 is relatively easy, and then sessions 2 and 3 start to build. At this point, you might even dial back your off legs cardio a bit, because the whole system might be getting a little bit taxed. So you can tune that based on individual needs, I think. I reckon you go.
Around that 2 to 3 week mark is where the accumulation of 2 weeks worth of just being on the court or on the field again, that kind of fatigue, while you won't see it in your athletes, it is going to be there. And that's probably why, that's a real reason why week 3 isn't just going to be, I'll do the same as week 2, but now run at 95%. You actually want to give that speed quite deliberately one more week, because the third week, 14 to 20 to 25 days after you've started, is actually when hammy strains, calf strains, quad tears, soft tissue injuries are at their most likely because of an accumulation of fatigue. So athletes will undereat, so they'll be low on glycogen, they'll be dehydrated, they'll be sleeping in different patterns, they might not be warming up as thoroughly. Also in Australia, we're coming into the colder months, so it's going to be cool to get playing outside sport. So that's when you're going to get the combination of couch-based tightness, because they've been at home, for months on end. Then the fatigue of having done 6 or 8 sessions in 14 days, after having done no sessions before that. You want to stay away from the high-speed work, because that's the real danger. Give that one more week, get a little bit of skills, get a little bit of moderate speed, get a little bit of conditioning, then start chasing the top speed, week 4, week 5 type stuff. And they're going to be getting a little bit of it anyway, little small doses as in your small-sided games and your competitive stuff anyway. You just wouldn't program any deliberate extra high-speed work.
And I should say,
would be the advice.
If taking this approach means that you lose round 1, you should be okay with that. Because the season, if you have a good team, the season is not won or lost in round 1. And what matters is how you are at the business end of it. Like if you're not coaching for development, if you are just coaching for wins, which happens, if you coach for development, then this is a no-brainer. But even if you're coaching for wins, the wins you really want are the ones at the business end of the season, and you want a healthy team for that as well. So if this would have mean that compromise your ability to win that first game, that's okay. If I was coaching a team, I'd be saying to my guys or girls, don't worry if we win or lose. Let's just get through the game playing well. Let's enjoy it. Let's put in good habits. Let's do the little controllable things. Don't expect this to be amazing. This is a very anomalous first game. It's an unusual situation you're in. So that's week 3. So we've called that layering in volume, and it really is a conditioning emphasis. And then week 4... I think week 4...
In our theoretical situation, that's probably game week in our theoretical 4-week ramp. You're playing at the end of week 4.
Yeah, and so I think it wants to be game pace stuff. So the game, you want to be building into game-like intensity, but with a sub-game-like volume. So that by the time you're at the end of that week, you've been doing this pace for a few workouts. Your body's used to it.
Probably even the end of week 3 as well. You've probably done half a session that's got a bit of that sort of stuff in there. Because it's not like you do 7 days, stop all that stuff, 7 days, start the new stuff. They're not discrete blocks the way we're describing them. They're a little more layered. So if you've got 3 sessions a week, by the end of week 2, you're starting to think about the week 3 things. By the end of week 3, you're starting to think about 5 minutes worth of the week 4 stuff, for example. Just to get a feel for it and to sort of integrate stuff in slowly and surely over your weeks. But I think you're right. Week 4, match-like intensity, so full-sided games, small-sided games, but more space, more intensity, more pressure, more emphasis on winning and scoring and things like that. So there's that competitive juices flowing, but shorter sessions, less of them. Not shorter sessions, shorter blocks of work at that competitive speed. And it's actually just reminded me, we had so we've been through situations exactly like this. One of the best examples was I had a situation with the Melbourne Boomers where Liz Cambridge came back into our program the week before the season started, and she hadn't played for 7 months. And so we're talking about a 6'8", 105 kilo girl who hasn't done any of the movements. And of course, quite understandably, the coaching staff like, okay, so she can play on the weekend? I'm like, no. And I had mapped out every single day for the first 6 weeks. That first week was just she's allowed to participate in the movements of basketball. And so I talked about an intensity ramp and then a volume ramp, which is actually exactly what we've just done here. The first thing is just gradually ramping the intensity,
And
with lots of rest and not much fatigue.
yeah, and then the last thing is, okay, now you're on your match, and the season will form most of your match intensity, match volume ramp. The intensity you'll set in that week, but then as the season goes on, that intensity will just build and build. And I suppose the closing thing I would say is, for when you're actually into season, so we'll call that round one, the team will play a bit crap on the Friday. You might have training on the Sunday, and it may well be, or they might try on maybe on the Saturday, whatever it may be. But there'll be that temptation to really, we weren't quite good enough, let's push hard. But also make sure you check in on their soreness levels, because they, again, as much as we try and control everything, there's just nothing like playing in terms of the stress on the body. So you could have a pretty sore group after that first game. So it's just that actually week 5, the first end of that might actually be a bit of a deload back into your week 3 work, just for that first session, as active recovery, and then you pick up where you left off with the intensity from week 4.
Yeah, nice. And if you need to smash them from a penalty point of view, read that soreness and maybe push it out 48 hours. Don't do it on the Sunday, do it on the Wednesday.
Or make them do push-ups or something where it's not going to, because we're not that worried
push-ups and wall sits. Yeah,
we're not worried about pec-based overuse injuries typically. So yeah, make it stuff that's not going to affect the part of the body that has to run around.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty good blueprint, provided you're constantly checking with how you're going. This isn't the blueprint that gets you the fittest in the first week. You'll be trailing the pack in week 1. You'll be trailing the pack in week 2.
You don't want to be the fittest in first week.
No, you just don't.
That team is just like they're set up for failure later on.
Yeah.
And individuals within that team will get lucky. And it's like, but such and such was fine and he got the MVP. It's like, yeah, but he rolled them dice. Like you're playing a statistical game, and you're better off putting the odds in your favour in terms of performance and injury. Like this works for both.
Yeah. And in a macro sense, you'll see teams that would not, in non-coronavirus scenarios, teams that come out of the gate destroying it in are so fit in round 1, and everyone's like, oh my god, look at them. It's like, well, you just peaked 5 months too early. It's okay. Yep. You don't want to be peaking too early. It's okay to be a little off the pace and then build that in. In terms of troubleshooting, I think that's pretty good. We've pointed out that if you're running so hard, you're getting a stitch in week 1. that's wrong.
You're doing too much and too hard.
The other big thing I think to contemplate is that we're very cognizant of the heart and lung adaptation, the structures of the ligaments, tendons, muscles, but it's that neural adaptation, that nervous system fatigue, that central nervous system fatigue. We're talking about it, and Pat brought that up. He said, well, that's going to be a real issue too, because that's going to feed into movement skill dysfunction. So it's knowing that their system is going to be tight. It's not just what they can feel, it's also going to be just their whole system. And athletes aren't going to want to complain about it because they're going to sound like sooks. Like if you're feeling a bit tired after your reload, you're not going to communicate that accurately, because you're going to look like the biggest, well, I'm tired. It's like, really? Everyone's tired. Shut up.
You're tired.
We've
just come back to sport and you're already tired. Like,
Yeah, get out. So you can't assume you're going to get particularly good reads on that. And so there may be things that you can do as a coach that are indicative of the levels of fatigue. So, for instance, it might be that there's a certain kicking drill or shooting drill that when you've got athletes who've got a good system, they can do those fine motor skills really well and they nail it, but when they're really fatigued, they suck at that, and you kind of know what some of those benchmarks are. So you might use those drills as a bit, knowing that you're not going to get an accurate answer verbally. You might track that with some skills-based stuff that gives you a bit of a sense of, okay, if all other things being equal, teams that are fresh are going to shoot foul shots better than teams that are exhausted, say, in basketball. Or teams are going to make certain handball drills under certain times. If it's a combination of reaction, skill, etc. I think those are going to be used. And it gives them something to chase as well, and keeps the emphasis on skills, I reckon.
Yeah, a bit like in the gym, how we use force plates.
Yeah.
And do jump tests and reactive strength index tests and all those kind of things. Like, okay, your strength is normal, like with an isometric mid-thigh pull or an isometric squat type test, but your power when you jump is way down, which is one of the most common early presentations. Is their sprint speed goes down, but that's a bit dangerous to test for fatigued athletes, because if you're successful at finding fatigued athletes, you'll also find injuries.
Hey, we found one. It turns out he was sore. He was tired. Yes.
He's out for 4 weeks because of the hammy. Thanks. Yeah. Whereas doing jump
Which
tests,
has never happened. I should just say that's not us talking about a thing that happened in our gym. Never happened.
We jest because it's something we don't do, and it's a bit of strength coach joke. But jump tests on the other side, on the other hand, doing a max effort counter movement jump or reactive continuous jumps can show you contact to flight time ratios, and that can show you neural freshness the same way a skill test would. So having some baseline skill test at your training where athletes have to report their number on a shooting test or a passing test or a handball accuracy thing, you go, oh wow, if the whole team is down by 20%, it's like, okay, people have off days, you can't pick one person, but on a macro population basis, you can really quickly go, oh, we're all a bit fuzzy today.
Yeah, exactly.
What's going on?
And the other thing to do is, one of my heroes in our field is Dr. Darren Burgess. In fact, I kind of quoted him today in one of my Instagram posts. He's amazing. And he would have this battery of these, 7 different readiness to train tests, predicted VO2 max, HRV, all these complicated, very sort of sensitive instruments to measure an athlete's physiological preparedness. But he would also have the Burjo test. And the Burjo test was just him looking at the session, rating it on a scale of 1 to 10. And I think in the same vein, coaches can tell, don't have a plan all written out perfectly and then stick to it to the death. If the team looks like rubbish and they're gassing, well, dial it back a little. On the other hand, if they look like they're doing fine, don't take that as an invitation to dial it up. Only dial back in the moment rather than dialing up. Because you really do want to see how things go the next day.
That's an important point, because there's a tendency that if you follow this plan, you'll get to week 3 or middle of week 2 and you go, great, everyone's perfect, let's just slam it.
Let's go.
Let's hit the gas. And it's like, no, you want everyone to be feeling fine and doing fine. That's the goal.
Yeah.
That's not an invitation to, we've won, throw the plan out. No, the plan is for 4 weeks. Now, the plan is for the whole 25 days.
Having said that, if you've got to a week, if you're in the middle of week 2 and no one has had any soreness, you've made it to that's you haven't had enough of an eccentric adaptation force into their bodies, because you've got to inoculate yourself gradually against those forces. So if you've got 0 soreness in anyone by middle of week 2, it's like, we need to put a bit of work into these bodies. There's no 2 ways about that.
That's a good point, actually.
So you know what I mean? There's that. It's about just gradually feeding in those adaptations. So you've got all the adaptations under their belt by the time you get to week 4.
So in that situation you explained, you can follow the plan more aggressively.
Yeah. You can push up.
If you were going up by 10% a session, you can go up by 20-25% a session.
Because because if you're at week 2.5 and a week 2 and a bit, and no one's had any soreness, then you've designed a program that's a little too easy. And it's just, you've got to calibrate that. Fine. Which is better to make that the other way around. But you've got to calibrate that a little bit by dialing things up. Not total body soreness, but just, if no one's getting any...
I suppose what I was trying to say, which I poorly I think there, was don't go doubling the sessions. Don't go doubling the sprints because everyone's fine. If everyone's fine, and as Darren explained, there's no sauna stuff, instead of going from 6 like you're playing, instead of going from 6 to 10 sprints, go from 6 to 12 or 6 to 15. Give it a decent jump on a certain block of the training, not the whole training session, but push one section or add a little more agility intensity here or there and see what happens. Yeah. Yeah,
because you want to make sure you're getting. The worst thing would be to listen to this, buy into all the concepts, but undercook them so badly that you arrive at round 1 and they've actually not put any work in to get any adaptations, and they play a game and you have 6 hammy tears. I don't want that. We want to make sure you're getting a controlled, incremental dosing of exercise at game speeds and in game like forces. Cool. It feels like that was a bit of a lecture, but I think that was a good way to tease out what 4 weeks looks like. And I think that's a pretty good template to start with.
Yeah, we got a little stuck in the weeds there at the end, but I think if you want to get out of the weeds, you should come along to Monday night's free webinar that Darren is hosting at 5:30. Is that right?
I think that's so, and we'll put it out in the socials as well. So 5:30 Monday Zoom. I'm going to be just going through a presentation talking about what you should and shouldn't do. With touching on these things again, it's probably, if you've listened to this, it's probably not going to be dramatically new things in terms of the principles. But it'll be a little more fleshed out in what you should do, when and how. And I'm also going to write a small blog article linking some of our resources as well, because with our app and with the various things we've written over the years, there's a fair bit of material around how you can nail this. And I should say too, Core Advantage is on the reload. We know we're going to be open again soon, so we are also happy to take on teams that are wanting to actually do more of this stuff down the track. So we can't be open right now, obviously, because we're not allowed to. But we are seeing this as probably a season where people need us more than they ever have. So we're more than happy to take on people. We've got a little bit of time.
Teams and individuals, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to do a couple, because it's this interesting thing where professional teams approach us and sports academies approach us and say, we need you to train our entire team. But we haven't had that much of that at the amateur level. And you can do that, and it's pretty cost effective, and it's very game effective. So that's a thing to know about. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next week. If you do have any ideas on topics, I've not been able to think about anything other than this, so I've not been able to come up with any other topics, and Jacob's probably the same. So if you have any, let us know, because we'd love to talk to you about the things that you want to hear about. Hit us up. Cool.
Beautiful.
All right. We'll see you next week. All right. Thanks, guys.
We'll see you on Monday, hopefully. Yeah.
See you on Monday. Yeah. Okay. All right. And before you go, hear from some of our alumni about our career transforming course, the online mentorship. Learn more about how you can join at our website.
I learnt the theory stuff at uni, but I didn't know how to apply it, and coming to Core Advantage was how I bridged that gap. So I knew the stuff, but I didn't know how to do the stuff.
It was something that I needed to do personally for my own development, and it's allowed me to work in elite sport for now 5 years, so it was a massive help.
I think mentorship is really important, and being able to ask questions all the time, and the Core Advantage course allows that because there is a big team of people that you can ask questions.
I get to train professional athletes every week, work really closely with professional athletes, which is awesome. A lot of the skills that I'm applying, I learned through the program at Core Advantage.
It's not just something that you read and then think about and then go, oh, how does that tie into everything? It's something that practical that you can turn around and go, this is exactly how I'm going to apply it. And the concepts that you learn help you as a coach, as a professional, as a person. Yeah, it's awesome. Definitely go and do it.
To sign up for the online mentorship, head to coreadvantage.training/mentorship.